Taoiseach, you and leaders from 24 other EU member states agreed to a new austerity treaty that will mean imposing savage austerity on the citizens of this state and citizens across Europe for years to come. It is no real surprise that you supported this treaty, as you have long signalled your support for the austerity approach, despite its devastating social consequences. In recent days, you said that you had no fear or concern or anxiety about the prospect of a referendum on the treaty. Yet the major focus of the government's negotiation strategy throughout this entire process has been to avoid the necessity to hold a referendum. If you have nothing to fear from this process, if you're so confident in this austerity treaty, why don't you stop hiding behind the Attorney General and put this to the people? The government should hold a referendum on the Eurozone austerity treaty, irrespective of the legal advice given by the Attorney General. Sinn Féin believe that this treaty, if ratified, will have a profound impact on the Irish economy and Irish people for decades to come. Recent opinion polls confirm that the overwhelming majority of the electorate support our view. A massive 72% believe that a referendum is necessary. It is clear that the people want to have their say on this matter. The government does not have a mandate to sign up to a treaty that will have such serious implications for the future. They must do the right thing and hold a referendum. Sinn Féin has argued that austerity is not the answer to this crisis. In fact, it is part of the problem. What is needed is a strategy for jobs and growth through stimulus. EU leaders seem to have finally woken up to this reality. Yet, however, while the EU leaders talked about these issues yesterday, not one additional cent of money has been allocated to job creation. All that emerged in recent days was a rehash of existing plans and money in job creation, no new plans and no new money. The so-called debt brake of 0.5% of GDP will heap yet more austerity on the people of Ireland. It means the handover of significant control of fiscal and budgetary matters to unelected and unaccountable EU officials. This austerity treaty is bad for Ireland and bad for Europe. Rather than stabilising the euro, it will make matters worse. And seeking to impose drastic and destructive austerity policies into perpetuity, this government is signing us all up to budgets that involve savage cuts for its full term of office and beyond. What is completely absent from this are any moves towards debt restructuring. Last week, you told the world, Taoiseach, if I can get your attention, that the people of Ireland went mad borrowing and this led to the economic crisis. The reality, of course, is that it was the banks who went mad borrowing cheap money from European banks. They did this to make a profit. They did it because they were greedy. This drove house prices higher and higher, forcing citizens to borrow large amounts of money simply to buy a place to live. These self-same banks are being bailed out by the taxpayer at a colossal cost of €63 billion. Taoiseach, last week in the Dáil, you said you didn't want to have the words defaulter written on our foreheads and that you hadn't sought a debt write-down. This point is that this banking debt is not our debt. It's not the people's debt, and it should not be paid. Taoiseach, was this issue raised by you at the European Council in recent days? Do you really believe Ireland can and should continue to shoulder the burden of this promissory note? So the response of the EU institutions to this crisis, supported by the IMF, has been to impose heavy austerity to the populations of peripheral economies while forcing their governments to take on massive loans to bail out toxic banks. This response is having devastating social consequences not only in Ireland but across the EU. Despite the endless round of crisis summits and the massive transfer of monies from taxpayers to banks and now this austerity treaty, this response to the crisis is simply not working. Youth unemployment is at crisis level in Ireland, with nearly a third of our young people out of work. And as you know, in Spain, half of their young people are out of work. So this approach is happening across Europe. Thousands of young Irish people have to leave the state every week to try and make a living somewhere else. What does the future hold for them? Where is the hope for them? And you know, Taoiseach, as a West of Ireland man, the impact of immigration. You know, the shadow of immigration on those small rural communities dotted across the west of Ireland, and the empty seats at the Christmas tables just gone. You know the impact and the tears at the airports, so we don't need to hear about lifestyle choices coming from any of your ministers again. Sinn Féin believes that Ireland's place is in Europe. Cooperation with our European partners is essential if we are to meet the challenges facing us in the time ahead. In attempting to portray the choice before the Irish people as that of accepting this austerity treaty or leaving the euro, the government are simply scaremongering. This is simply not the case. Ireland's position as a member of the Eurozone is secure no matter what position we take on this treaty. The real question currently facing this Dáil and the Irish people is whether this treaty is a good deal for Ireland and for Europe. Sinn Féin firmly believes it is not. Now, just to get into the whole issue of this, Article 3.2, as you know, in the first draft, Taoiseach, we had very clear language at the insistence of Angela Merkel's government that we shall transpose these agreements into the Constitution or equivalent legislation. So the first draft was very clear on the desire of Merkel's government and what they wanted. And your colleague, the Taoiseach, speaking to the European Affairs Committee here in these houses, confirmed, now you have refused to do it today, so I'm just going to clarify the matter for you. He confirmed that our negotiators, clearly at the instruction of either yourself or the Taoiseach, presumably both, actively sought to weaken that text, to put in the word preferably constitutional, in order to avoid the requirement to put this proposition before the Irish people. But the words binding and permanent are still there. They're still there. All of the draconian austerity measures that will go beyond now this Troika package are still there. All the implications are still there. But what's not there, the only changes that you secured were preventing the Irish people having their say on this issue. That is absolutely outrageous and absolutely shameful. And then we had your Minister for Transport, Leo Varadkar, telling us that, you know, in these debates, people tend to focus on all sorts of things. You know, they might focus on septic tanks, on bank bailouts and all these issues. This is an 11-page document. I mean, even if you sort of accepted some of his points, it's not the Lisbon Treaty. It's not the Nice Treaty. It's an 11-page document. The issues are pretty clear, and they can be argued very clearly, and they can be accessible to our people. There's absolutely no justification for not putting this before our people because the implications are so profound. So that's what you achieved in the negotiations. The only thing you achieved in terms of Merkel's crazy, crazy austerity-driven approach is to prevent the Irish people having their say. And you know, austerity has just not worked. And if you don't want to take Sinn Féin's word for it, I'm sure you'll take the word of the IMF. The IMF recently published a report which has looked at austerity over the last 30 years, 173 different case studies. And all that austerity has done in the absence of some growth strategy is drive up unemployment, is make conditions extremely harsh. This is a bonkers strategy that I have yet to hear one economist say can possibly work, can possibly, as you said was your objective, get Ireland back to work, make Ireland the best country to do business, the best small country in the world to do business. How in the name of God are you going to achieve that by signing up to this document without any plan for growth, without any sense of investment, without any real economic approach or outline plan? So that's the IMF. Now, if you're not happy with the IMF, I'll give you some more. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize-winning economist. You know that guy you called a commentator? He said he was a commentator. Commentators commentate when you're over in Davos. Remember where you said that the Irish people went mad borrowing? And you talked about Joseph Stiglitz was a commentator. Joseph Stiglitz is a Nobel Prize-winning economist that travels the world. Yes, an eminent man. And he said that paying back unsecured bondholders was unconscionable. He talked about this being a suicide pact. That's the language he used. A very thoughtful man, a man who has, has inspired people with his analysis of economics and what needs to happen around the world. This is a suicide pact, this whole approach of austerity. Now, if Joseph Stiglitz isn't good enough for you, the commentator that you called him,